I never thought I'd hear those words from Sarah's mouth. "Dad, you're 3 days late on rent again," she screamed, slamming her palm on my kitchen table. "Pay up or get out by Friday." My own daughter treating me like a deadbeat tenant in the house I'd built with my bare hands 30 years ago. I stared at the coffee mug I'd been nursing, watching the steam rise. She didn't know the truth. Nobody did. And maybe it was time to teach her the most expensive lesson of her life. 3 months before that kitchen table confrontation, I stood in the lawyer's office, signing the final papers for the sale of my construction company. My hands, weathered from decades of framing houses and laying foundations, trembled slightly as I wrote my signature on the line that would transfer ownership of Jasper Hayes Construction to a national development firm. $2.3 million. After taxes and fees, I'd walk away with enough money to live comfortably for the rest of my days. The decision hadn't come easily. For 40 years, I'd built that company from nothing but a pickup truck and a toolbox. Started with small repair jobs, worked my way up to custom homes, eventually landing commercial contracts that put my crews on job sites across 3 counties. But without Helen, none of it meant anything anymore. My wife had been gone 6 months when I signed those papers. Pancreatic cancer took her so fast, I barely had time to process what was happening. One day, she was complaining about back pain. 8 weeks later, I was picking out her casket. The house we'd shared for 35 years felt like a mausoleum. Every room held memories that cut deeper than any saw blade ever could. Sarah called the day after the sale went through. "Dad, I heard about the company. That must have been so hard for you." Her voice dripped with a sympathy that sounded rehearsed. "You know Brad and I have been talking. That big house must be so lonely for you now. Why don't you come stay with us for a while?" I should have heard the calculation in her tone. Should have noticed how quickly she pivoted from condolences to invitation. But grief makes fools of us all, and I was desperate for family connection. "That's kind of you, sweetheart," I said, staring at the check in my hand. "But I wouldn't want to impose." "Don't be silly. You're family. Besides, our house has that mother-in-law suite in the basement. It's perfect. You'd have your own space, but we'd be right upstairs if you needed anything." Our house. That's what she called it. The house I'd built for her and her mother when Sarah was 7 years old. The house I'd transferred to Helen's name for tax purposes 15 years ago, never bothering to change it back after she died. Sarah must have assumed her mother had left it to her, though no will had ever surfaced. I made a decision that day. Call it a test, call it curiosity, or maybe just the addled thinking of a grieving widower. I deposited most of the money from the sale into investment accounts, keeping only enough in my checking to appear modestly comfortable. If my daughter wanted me to live with her, I'd come as a simple retiree on a fixed income, not as a multimillionaire. I wanted to see who she really was when money wasn't visible on the table. The move happened 2 weeks later. I packed light, bringing only clothes, some tools, and photo albums. The furniture I donated, the house I sold to a young couple who reminded me of Helen and myself 40 years prior. Sarah and her husband Brad helped me carry boxes down to the basement suite. "It's perfect down here," Brad said, his smile too wide, his handshake too eager. "Private entrance, your own bathroom, little kitchenette, like your own apartment." Brad Thompson was the kind of man who wore golf shirts to convince people he played golf. At 42, he'd been unemployed for 3 years, always chasing the next big opportunity that never materialized. Real estate ventures that collapsed, day trading strategies that emptied bank accounts, cryptocurrency investments that vanished overnight. Sarah worked as a dental hygienist to keep them afloat while Brad pursued his delusions of easy wealth. "I appreciate you both taking me in," I said, setting down a box of books. "I want to contribute, of course. What would be fair for rent?" The look that passed between them should have told me everything. Brad's eyes lit up like a slot machine hitting 777s. Sarah tried to appear nonchalant, but her fingers drummed against her thigh, a nervous habit since childhood. "Dad, you don't need to pay rent," Sarah said unconvincingly. "Your family." "Nonsense. I'm using utilities taking up space. How about $800 a month?" Brad practically lunged forward. Well, if you insist on contributing, that would help with the mortgage. Times are tight, you know. Actually, Sarah interjected, shooting Brad a look. 1,200 would be more in line with market rates for a suite this size. But only if you're comfortable with that, Dad. Market rates. For a basement in the house I built. I nodded slowly. 1,200 it is. First of the month work for you. The relief on their faces was palpable. Brad clapped me on the shoulder like we'd just closed a business deal. Sarah hugged me, and for a moment, I felt the warmth of genuine affection. Maybe I was being too cynical. Maybe they really did want to help their widowed father. That delusion lasted exactly 1 week. The rules started small. Sarah knocked on my door the first Saturday morning, catching me having coffee and reading the newspaper. Dad about the kitchen. She began not quite meeting my eyes. Brad and I have a system for mealtimes. We'd appreciate if you could do your cooking before 5 p.m. or after 8 p.m. We need the space for dinner prep. Of course, I agreed, though the kitchen I'd designed specifically with an open floor plan to accommodate multiple cooks seemed to mock the conversation. Next came restrictions on the laundry, Tuesdays and Thursdays only. Then parking. My truck needed to be at the far end of the driveway so it wouldn't block Brad's BMW, a lease he couldn't afford on a car he rarely drove. And Dad, Sarah added during one of these rule-setting sessions, if you're going to have visitors, we need 24-hour notice. This is our home, and we need to know who's coming and going. Our home. There it was again. Brad's borrowing started in week 3. He'd knock on my door at odd hours, always with a story. Hey Jasper, hate to ask, but I've got a job interview tomorrow and my car's on empty. Could you spot me 40 for gas? I'll pay you back when I get the position. The positions never materialized. The $40 turned into 60, then 100. Always for job-related expenses. New clothes for an interview, registration fees, for professional certifications, gas money to meet potential business partners. I kept a notebook tracking every dollar. Not because I needed the money, but because I wanted to see how far they'd push. Sarah knew about the loans. She'd appear after Brad left, apologizing with words that rang hollow. He's just going through a rough patch. You know how it is for men his age in this economy. Men, his age. Brad was 20 years younger than me, and had never held a steady job in the time I'd known him. But I played along, pulling out my worn wallet, counting out bills like a pensioner, stretching Social Security checks. The first time I heard them talking about me, really talking, I was coming up from the basement for a glass of water. They must have thought I was asleep. Their voices carried down the hallway from the living room. He's got to have more money than he's showing, Brad insisted. Nobody sells a company like that and walks away with nothing. He paid taxes, Sarah replied, and Mom's medical bills were astronomical. He probably has just enough to get by. Then, we need to think long-term. He's only getting older. What happens when he can't take care of himself? There are places for that. Facilities. Expensive facilities, unless what? Unless we have power of attorney. If something happens, if he's not competent to make decisions, we could manage his assets. The glass in my hand trembled. I set it down carefully on the counter, my construction-calloused hands absolutely steady, despite the rage building in my chest. My own daughter, plotting to have me declared incompetent, planning my institutionalization like I was already gone. I crept back downstairs, my mind racing. They wanted to play games with an old man, fine. But they'd forgotten something crucial. I hadn't built a successful company by being anybody's fool. The wolf might have gray in his whiskers, but his teeth remained sharp. That night, I lay in the bed I'd bought for the basement in the house I'd built, listening to footsteps above from the daughter I'd raised. The same little girl who used to ride on my shoulders at job sites, wearing a hard hat I'd had specially made for her. The teenager I'd taught to drive in my work truck. The young woman I'd walked down the aisle at her wedding. Where had that girl gone? When had she become this stranger, who saw her father as nothing more than a monthly check and a future inheritance? I thought about Helen, what she would say. She'd always been the one to see the best in people, especially Sarah. "She's just stressed, Jasper," she would have said. "Young families struggle. Be patient with her." But Helen never heard our daughter discussing nursing homes like I was livestock to be corralled. She never saw the gleam in our son-in-law's eyes when he calculated my remaining years versus my potential net worth. The next morning, Sarah knocked early. "Dad, I hate to bring this up, but the rent, it was due yesterday." I pulled out my checkbook, making a show of writing slowly, like my hands weren't as steady as they used to be. "Sorry, sweetheart. Memory's not what it was. 1,200, right?" "That's right." She took the check, folding it quickly into her pocket. "Actually, while I'm here, Brad and I were thinking. You've been cooking a lot downstairs. Maybe it would be better if you joined us for dinners. Family time, you know. We could add a meal plan to your rent. Say an extra $300 a month. $300 for the privilege of eating at the table I'd built in the dining room, I'd framed under the chandelier I'd wired." I smiled warmly. "That sounds nice. Family dinners." She left satisfied with her small victory. I sat back in my chair, pulling out a different notebook. This one didn't track borrowed money. This one tracked lies, schemes, and every word I overheard when they thought I was sleeping. Sarah and Brad wanted to play house with my life. The game was just beginning, and they had no idea who they were playing against. 4 weeks into my stay at Sarah's house, the masks they wore began slipping with increasing frequency. Like cheap Halloween costumes worn too long, the friendly faces they presented started peeling at the edges, revealing something altogether different underneath. It started with Emma, my granddaughter. At 14, she had her mother's eyes, but thankfully seemed to have skipped her disposition. Emma would sneak down to the basement after school before her parents got home, seeking refuge from the tension upstairs. "Grandpa, can I do homework down here?" she asked one Tuesday afternoon, hefting a backpack that looked like it weighed more than she did. "It's quiet." "Of course, sweetheart. Want some cookies? I picked up those chocolate chip ones you like." Her face lit up, then immediately dimmed. "Mom says I shouldn't take food from you. She says you need to watch your budget." My budget. As if I couldn't afford a $3 package of cookies for my granddaughter. But I smiled and pushed the package across the table anyway. Our secret. Emma settled at my small kitchen table, spreading out algebra worksheets. We worked in companionable silence until we heard the garage door rumble open above us. Sarah was home. Emma scrambled to pack her things. "I should go. Mom doesn't like me bothering you." "You're never a bother," I said firmly. "Remember that." She gave me a quick hug and disappeared up the stairs. 5 minutes later, I heard Sarah's sharp voice. "What were you doing down there? I told you to leave Grandpa alone. He needs his rest." The conversation I overheard that night changed everything. I'd gone upstairs around 9:30 to return a dish Sarah had brought down with dinner. Pot roast that was mostly gristle, accompanied by her usual reminder that I was getting premium meal service for my extra $300 a month. The house was dark, except for a light from their bedroom. I moved quietly, a lifetime of early morning construction sites, having taught me to navigate in darkness. Their door was cracked open, voices carrying clearly into the hallway. "The Willows called back," Sarah was saying. "They have an opening next month." "The Willows?" Brad sounded interested. "That's the place out on Highway 12. The memory care facility, yes. They specialize in dementia patients." My blood froze. Memory care. Dementia patients. "He's not that bad yet," Brad pointed out. "Still pretty sharp for an old guy. But he's showing signs. Forgetting to pay rent, leaving the stove on that one time, getting confused about days. I've been documenting everything. Leaving the stove on, that never happened." My mind raced through the past weeks, trying to recall any incident. Then I remembered Sarah had come down one morning claiming she smelled gas, insisted on checking my stove. She'd made a big production of it, even took pictures. I'd thought nothing of it at the time. "What about the house?" Brad asked. "If he goes into care." "I've been researching. If we have power of attorney, we can sell assets to pay for his care. This house alone is worth at least $800,000 in this market. More if we update the kitchen, maybe add a deck out back. $800,000! Brad's voice took on that dreamy quality it got when he talked about money he didn't have. We could buy that condo downtown, the one with the doorman and the gym membership. First things first. Dr. Morrison says we need more documentation. Medical episodes, confusion, inability to manage daily tasks. I've been keeping a journal. A journal. My daughter was building a case against me, creating a paper trail of incompetence where none existed. Every forgotten detail would be magnified, every human moment of grief or distraction, transformed into evidence of cognitive decline. What about Emma? Brad asked. She's been spending time with him. I'll handle Emma. She's too young to understand what's best for everyone. Besides, teenage testimony isn't given much weight in these situations. I backed away from the door, my hands shaking with fury rather than age. In the darkness of the hallway, I made myself breathe slowly, deeply. Getting angry would accomplish nothing. Getting even, however, required planning. The next morning, I made my first call from the privacy of my truck, parked at the far end of a grocery store lot. The phone rang twice before a familiar voice answered. Patterson Investigations, Marcus speaking. Marcus Patterson wasn't related to my neighbor Mrs. Patterson, despite the shared surname. He was a former police detective who'd done background checks for my construction company when we hired for sensitive commercial projects. More importantly, he was discreet. Marcus, it's Jasper Hayes. I need your services, but this is personal, not business. Mr. Hayes, good to hear from you. I was sorry to hear about Helen. How can I help? I explained the situation, keeping my voice steady, despite the emotions churning beneath the surface. Marcus listened without interruption, occasionally making small sounds of acknowledgement that grew increasingly angry as the story progressed. Let me get this straight, he said when I finished. Your daughter is manufacturing evidence to have you declared incompetent, so she can steal your assets. That's the short version, yes. And she doesn't know you own the house, or that you're worth millions from the company sale. Correct. I need documentation, Marcus. Real evidence of what they're planning. Can you help? Can I help? His laugh was mirthless. Mr. Hayes, I've got 3 daughters. If any of them tried this with me, let's just say I'm motivated to assist. What's your timeline? As soon as possible. They mentioned an opening at the Willows next month. I'll start today. Fair warning, this kind of family investigation can get ugly. You sure you want to know everything I might find? I thought of Sarah's journal, her manufactured evidence, the casual cruelty of planning my institutionalization over pot roast. I need to know it all. My second call was to James Fitzgerald, who'd handled my business affairs for 20 years. Unlike Marcus's anger, James's reaction was cold, calculated, and somehow more terrifying. We'll need to move your assets immediately, he said. Multiple trusts, layered ownership structures. If they're building a competency case, we need your estate ironclad before any judge sees their petition. Can you come to my office tomorrow? I'll be there. Jasper, I'm going to ask you something as your attorney, and I hope your friend. Are you prepared for the nuclear option? Once we start this process, once they realize what's happening, your relationship with your daughter may be irreparable. I stared through the windshield at families loading groceries, normal people living normal lives where daughters didn't plot against fathers. James, she's already destroyed it. She just doesn't know it yet. Over the following days, I became an actor worthy of an Academy Award. I shuffled when Sarah was watching, squinted at medicine bottles, asked the same questions twice, fed her narrative while building my own. Every night, I recorded our conversations using a small device Marcus had provided, no bigger than a button. The revelations came quickly. Marcus discovered Brad had been intercepting my mail, searching for bank statements and investment documents. He'd been photographing every envelope, researching return addresses, building his own file on my potential worth. Sarah had been in contact with 3 different elder care attorneys, shopping for one willing to push a competency hearing on thin evidence. "There's more," Marcus said during one of our clandestine meetings at a diner across town. He pushed a folder across the table. "Your son-in-law has interesting hobbies." The photos showed Brad at the Riverside Casino, the same establishment that had billboards promising to change your life with one spin. He was a regular, apparently. 3-4 times a week, always at the high-stakes poker tables. "Let me guess," I said. "The money I've been lending him for job interviews?" "Every penny. He's down about $60,000 this year alone. They're borrowing against credit cards. Home equity would be next, if they actually owned the home." "What about Sarah? Does she know?" Marcus shrugged. "Hard to say. But she's been selling jewelry family pieces from what I can tell. Either she knows and is enabling, or she's covering shortfalls without asking questions." I closed the folder, feeling older than my 65 years. This wasn't just greed or opportunism. This was desperation, dressed up as elder abuse. They were drowning and saw me as a life raft, not caring if they had to push me under to stay afloat. That night dinner was particularly tense. Brad kept glancing at me, something calculating in his expression. Sarah chattered nervously about neighborhood gossip, filling silence with words that meant nothing. Emma ate quickly, asking to be excused the moment her plate was clean. "Actually, Emma, stay a moment," Sarah said. "We need to have a family discussion." Emma settled back in her chair, resignation written across her young face. I recognized that look. It was the same expression Sarah used to wear when Helen and I argued about money during the lean years of starting the business. "Your grandfather is getting older." Sarah began using the gentle voice adults employ when lying to children. "And sometimes when people get older, they need extra help. Special help." "I'm sitting right here," I interjected mildly. Sarah's smile grew fixed. "Of course, Dad. This involves you too. We're just worried about you living alone downstairs. What if something happened? What if you fell?" "I've been walking since before you were born, sweetheart. Haven't fallen yet." Brad leaned forward. "It's not just about falling, Jasper. It's about quality of life. There are places, good places with people your own age. Activities. Medical staff on hand." "Like a prison with bingo," Emma muttered. "Emma," Sarah's voice sharpened, "that's not appropriate. Neither is shipping Grandpa off because you want his room." Emma shot back, then immediately looked stricken at her own boldness. The silence that followed could have been measured with a seismic meter. Sarah's face cycled through emotions like a slot machine before settling on cold fury. "Go to your room, now." Emma fled. I heard her door slam upstairs, followed by muffled music. Brad shifted uncomfortably while Sarah gathered herself. "Dad, I apologize for Emma. She's at a difficult age." "Seems pretty clear-headed to me," I observed. Sarah's mask finally slipped completely. For just a moment I saw naked frustration and something else. Fear, maybe. Or desperation wearing anger's clothes. "This is exactly what I'm talking about," she snapped. "You're encouraging her defiance, undermining our authority. It's not healthy, Dad. For any of us." I stood slowly, making sure to grip the table like I needed support. "You're right. This isn't healthy. I'll be downstairs." As I descended to my basement suite, I heard them arguing in hushed tones. Sarah's voice rose and fell like an angry tide, while Brad's remained steady, placating. Planning their next move, no doubt. I sat at my small table, pulling out the notebook where I tracked their lies. The pages were filling up fast. Tomorrow, I'd meet with James to finalize the asset protection. Next week, Marcus would have complete surveillance records. But tonight I just felt tired. Not the physical exhaustion that comes from decades of manual labor, but the bone-deep weariness of watching someone you love become a stranger. I picked up the photo of Helen I kept by my bed. We'd taken it on our 30th anniversary, her laughing at something I'd said, probably one of my terrible construction puns. "What would you do, Helen?" I asked the smiling face. "How did our little girl become this?" The photo, of course, had no answers. But I knew what Helen would have said. She always believed in redemption, in second chances, in the power of love to overcome greed. Even at the end, when the cancer had taken almost everything, she'd held my hand and made me promise to take care of Sarah. "I'm trying, sweetheart," I whispered to the photo, "but she's making it awfully hard." Upstairs, a door slammed. Brad's voice rose briefly, then cut off. The house I'd built settled around me with familiar creaks and sighs. Somewhere in the walls, pipes I'd soldered carried water through channels I'd planned. The bones of this place knew my touch, recognized their maker. Sarah might think she owned this house, but we both knew the truth. Houses remember their builders just as fathers remember the daughters they raised. And sometimes, both memories hurt more than any physical pain could match. Tomorrow, the wolf would keep pretending to be weak, while sharpening his claws in secret. But tonight, I allowed myself this moment of grief for the family we used to be, before money and desperation poisoned the well of love. The game would continue. The trap would be set. Justice would come dressed in legal documents and recorded conversations. But victory, I was learning, could taste an awful lot like loss. The morning after the dinner confrontation, I met Marcus Patterson at a small coffee shop 20 miles from the house. He'd chosen the location carefully, far enough that we wouldn't run into anyone from the neighborhood, but close enough to be convenient. The man had been a detective for 30 years before going private, and it showed in every calculated decision. "You look tired," Marcus observed, sliding a thick envelope across the table. "Didn't sleep much," I admitted, wrapping my hands around the coffee cup. "Hard to rest when you know there are snakes in the grass above you." He nodded sympathetically, then tapped the envelope. "This might not help with sleep, but it'll help with everything else. I've been thorough." Inside were photographs, documents, and transcripts that painted a picture worse than I'd imagined. Brad's gambling debts exceeded $80,000, with markers out to some unpleasant people. Sarah had opened credit cards in both their names, maxing them out to cover his losses. They were 3 months behind on property taxes for the house they thought they owned. "There's a timeline here," Marcus explained, pointing to a detailed chart. "The gambling started about 5 years ago, small stakes. It accelerated after Brad lost his last steady job. Your daughter started covering for him 2 years ago. The conversation about putting you in a home that started 6 months ago, right after Helen passed. They were planning this while I was planning her funeral," I said flatly. "I'm afraid so. But here's the interesting part." He pulled out another document. "They've been in contact with a Dr. Morrison. He's, let's call him ethically flexible. Lost his hospital privileges 2 years ago for overprescribing. Now he works private practice, specializing in competency evaluations for families looking to gain control of estates. A doctor who sells diagnoses. Essentially, they had an appointment scheduled for you next week. Supposed to be a routine checkup, but the paperwork tells a different story." I studied the forms. Cognitive evaluation, memory assessment capacity for independent living. All the boxes that would need checking to lock me away. "They're not the only ones planning ahead," Marcus continued. "Your neighbor, Mrs. Patterson. She's been keeping her own records. Seems she doesn't care for how your daughter treats you. She's willing to testify if needed." Mrs. Patterson was 82 years old, sharp as a surgical scalpel, and had lived next door for 20 years. She'd brought casseroles when Helen was sick, sat with me during the funeral, and apparently had been watching Sarah's behavior with growing disgust. "One more thing," Marcus said, lowering his voice. "I did some checking on the house ownership. You were smart to never update the deed after Helen passed. Legally, it's in probate limbo. Sarah assumes it transferred to her, but without a will explicitly stating that you're Helen's sole heir as surviving spouse. The house is yours. And she has no idea. None. She's been telling people she inherited it, even looked into refinancing. Every bank has turned her down because she can't prove ownership. She thinks it's just paperwork delays." I leaned back, processing everything. The wolf inside me, the one that had built a company from nothing, was fully awake now. But this required more than construction savvy. This required precision. I need you to do something else, I said. Can you find out if there are any buyers looking for quick cash deals on houses in the neighborhood? Marcus grinned. Already ahead of you. There's a developer who's been buying up properties on your street. Robert Chen, completely legitimate, pays cash, closes fast. He'd probably offer $850, $860 for your place given the location. Contact him, discreetly, but don't mention my name yet. That afternoon, I drove to James Fitzgerald's law office. The building was a converted Victorian mansion, all dark wood and leather, that smelled of old money and careful planning. James met me in his private conference room, documents already spread across the mahogany table. I've structured everything through a series of trusts. He explained, walking me through each document. Your liquid assets are already protected. The house is trickier since it's still in Helen's name, but I've prepared transfer documents that will clean that up quickly when you're ready. And if they try to claim I wasn't competent when I signed these, that's why we're video recording everything today. Timestamps witnesses cognitive evaluation by a legitimate psychiatrist I've brought in. Dr. Sarah Winters, head of psychiatric services at University Hospital. Unimpeachable reputation. Dr. Winters was a composed woman in her 50s who put me through 2 hours of cognitive testing. Memory exercises, problem-solving scenarios, complex mathematical calculations. I scored in the 95th percentile for my age group. Mr. Hayes, she said when we finished, not only are you completely competent, you're sharper than most people half your age. I'll be providing a detailed report stating that any claims of dementia or cognitive decline are completely unfounded. What if they, Dr. Shop, find someone willing to say otherwise? Then we'll see them in court with my evaluation, your business history, and the clear evidence of your continued capacity. No judge would side with them. James had thought of everything. Power of attorney documents naming him as my representative if I ever did become incapacitated. Living will with explicit instructions. Even a document stating that under no circumstances should Sarah or Brad have any say in my medical or financial decisions. There's one more thing, James said as we wrapped up. I've drafted a sale agreement for the house. Blank spaces for buyer and price. When you're ready, we can execute it in 24 hours. How soon could we close? With a cash buyer, 7 days, maybe less. I signed where he indicated each signature, another nail in the coffin of Sarah's scheme. By the time I left his office, my assets were locked up tighter than a bank vault. Sarah could scheme all she wanted. She'd find nothing but legal walls at every turn. That evening, I installed the recording devices Marcus had provided. Tiny cameras that looked like smoke detector parts, audio recorders that appeared to be phone chargers. All legal since I was recording in my own living space. The footage would stream to a secure server, creating an indisputable record of every interaction. Sarah came down after dinner with papers of her own. Dad, I've been thinking about what's best for everyone, she began, her voice honey-sweet. This is just a simple document giving me permission to speak with your doctors, handle your prescriptions, that sort of thing. Nothing major. I pretended to study the papers, squinting, as if I couldn't quite make out the words. In reality, I could see it was much more than she claimed. Medical power of attorney, financial authorization, even a clause about residential decisions. I don't know, sweetheart. Seems like a lot of legal language. It's standard stuff. Brad's mom signed something similar last year. It just makes things easier for everyone. Brad's mother was in a memory care unit in Florida, her house sold to pay for it. I'd done my research too. Let me think about it, I said, setting the papers aside. Maybe I should have someone look at it first. Sarah's smile tightened. Dad, it's just family taking care of family. You don't need lawyers for that. Still, Helen always said to read everything twice and sign once. Invoking Helen's name usually ended arguments. Sarah couldn't argue with her sainted mother's wisdom. She left the papers clearly frustrated, but trying not to show it. Later that night, I heard them arguing upstairs. The recording devices picked up every word. He's getting suspicious, Sarah hissed. We need to move faster. The appointment with Morrison is Tuesday, Brad replied. Once we have his evaluation, we can file the petition. What if he doesn't go? Tell him it's for his Medicare, routine physical. He'll go. They were wrong, of course. But I'd let them think otherwise. The wolf was patient now, watching waiting gathering strength for the perfect moment to strike. I made a call to Robert Chen the next morning using Marcus as an intermediary. The developer was interested, very interested. The neighborhood was gentrifying, and my corner lot with its mature trees and solid construction was exactly what he looked for. I can offer $840,000, he said through Marcus. Cash quick, close as his condition. Tell him $860, and he has a deal, I replied. But I need complete discretion until closing. Done. The pieces were falling into place. Sarah and Brad thought they were playing chess, while I was still learning checkers. They had no idea the board had already been flipped, the game already won. They just hadn't realized it yet. Emma knocked on my door that evening looking worried. Grandpa, I heard Mom on the phone. She was talking about doctors and evaluations. Are you sick? I pulled my granddaughter into a hug. No, sweetheart. I'm perfectly healthy. Just some routine checkups. She was also talking about selling things. Your things. Smart girl. Too smart to be fooled by her parents' lies. Emma, can you keep a secret? She nodded solemnly. Sometimes adults make bad choices when they're scared about money. Your parents are scared right now, and they're not thinking clearly. But I need you to trust that everything will work out. Are you going to leave? The question hit harder than expected. Not forever, but there might be some changes coming. Whatever happens, remember that I love you, and I'll always be your grandfather. That won't change. She hugged me tighter. I love you too, Grandpa. Mom and Dad, they're not being good people right now, are they? They're being human, I said carefully. Humans make mistakes. What matters is whether we learn from them. After Emma left, I sat in my small living room surrounded by the instruments of my counteroffensive. Legal documents, surveillance equipment, evidence of their deception. The righteous anger that had sustained me began to mix with something else. Sadness, perhaps, or just the weight of necessary endings. The wolf was awake, teeth-sharp claws ready. But even wolves could feel sorrow for what had to be done. In 72 hours, I'd spring the trap they'd built for themselves. Sarah wanted the house, she'd get exactly what she deserved. I pulled out my phone and sent a single text to James. Schedule the closing, next Friday. Then I poured myself a small glass of whiskey, Helen's favorite brand, that I'd kept for special occasions. This qualified, though she might not have approved of the circumstances. Here's to teaching hard lessons. I toasted the empty room. And to hoping someone learns from them. The whiskey burned, but not as much as the knowledge of what was coming. Sarah had forced my hand with her greed and deception. Now she'd learn why you never corner a wolf, especially one who built his den with his own 2 hands. Tuesday morning arrived with spring rain pattering against the basement windows. I dressed carefully, choosing worn clothes that made me look every one of my 65 years. Shabby cardigan pants with a small stained shoes that had seen better decades. If Sarah wanted to paint me as a declining old man, I'd give her the visual evidence to support her fiction. She knocked at 7 sharp earlier than usual. Through my security cameras, I'd watched her pacing upstairs since dawn, rehearsing her lines like an actress before opening night. Dad, are you awake? We need to leave for your appointment in an hour. I opened the door slowly, adding a slight tremor to my movements. Appointment? What appointment? Her face lit up with false concern. Your Medicare checkup, remember we talked about it last week. Dr. Morrison, the new physician who takes your insurance. Oh, right, Morrison. I scratched my head, feigning confusion. Do I need to bring anything? Just your insurance cards. I'll drive you. Perfect. Everything captured on audio, her lies preserved in digital amber. I shuffled around, taking my time getting ready, while she grew increasingly agitated. Brad appeared dressed in his golf costume despite the rain. I'll come too, he announced. Make it a family outing. Family outing. To deliver me to a corrupt doctor who'd declare me incompetent for the right price. I wondered if Judas had called it a family outing when he led Christ to the Romans. The drive took 30 minutes through morning traffic. Sarah kept up a stream of chatter about Dr. Morrison's credentials, how highly recommended he was, how lucky we were to get an appointment. Brad chimed in occasionally, both of them working so hard to seem casual that they achieved the opposite effect. Morrison's office occupied a strip mall between a nail salon and a tax preparation service. The waiting room smelled of industrial disinfectant and broken dreams. Water stains marked the ceiling tiles, and the magazines were 3 years out of date. Exactly the kind of place where ethics went to die. Mr. Hayes. A nurse called my name within minutes. No wait, despite a half-full waiting room. They'd paid for priority service. Dr. Morrison matched his office shabby, desperate, trying too hard to appear legitimate. Late 50s thinning hair smile that never reached his eyes. He greeted Sarah and Brad like old friends, which they probably were by now. Mr. Hayes, wonderful to meet you. Your daughter's told me so much about you. Has she? I settled into the examination chair. All good things, I hope. Of course, of course. Now I understand you've been having some challenges lately. Memory issues, confusion. News to me, Doc. Sarah interjected quickly. Dad, remember last week? You forgot where you parked at the grocery store. And the stove incident. Right, the stove. I let my eyes go slightly unfocused. When was that again? Morrison made notes, head bobbing like a dashboard ornament. For the next hour, he put me through a series of tests clearly designed to make me fail. Complex word problems delivered too quickly, memory exercises with intentional distractions, physical tasks that would challenge someone half my age. I failed just enough to be concerning, but not enough to seem like I was faking. Missed a few word associations, stumbled over one memory sequence, took too long on a puzzle. Meanwhile, I memorized every detail, the pre-filled forms on his desk, with cognitive decline, already checked the way he coached my responses with leading questions. Sarah's satisfied nod when I struggled with a particularly unfair test. Well, Morrison said finally, I have some concerns. Nothing definitive yet, but I'd like to schedule follow-up testing. More comprehensive evaluation. Whatever you think is best, doctor, I replied meekly. Sarah practically glowed. We just want what's best for Dad. In the car afterward, she was almost giddy. See, that wasn't so bad. Dr. Morrison seems very thorough. Seemed expensive, I noted. All those tests. Insurance covers that. Brad answered too quickly. Don't worry about cost, Jasper. We've got it handled. Of course they did. With my future $860,000 house sale. Back home, I made a show of being tired, needing a nap. They helped me downstairs, Sarah actually tucking a blanket around me like I was a child. The moment they left, I was on the phone with James. It's worse than we thought, I reported. Morrison already had forms filled out. They're moving fast. Then we move faster, James replied. Can you get to my office tomorrow? We need to execute the sale documents. I'll be there. That evening, I paid my rent 3 days late. Sarah pounced on the opportunity like a cat on a wounded mouse. She didn't knock this time, just used her key to enter my suite. Dad, the rent. You're late again. I was ready for her sitting at my table with bills spread out, calculator in hand, playing the part of a confused old man overwhelmed by finances. I'm sorry, sweetheart. The numbers just don't add up like they used to. Maybe you should handle the money. Her eyes gleamed. Actually, that might be best, just until you're feeling better. I suppose, though I should probably pay this month first. Of course. I wrote the check slowly, deliberately putting the wrong date, crossing it out, starting over. Sarah watched every shaky letter with satisfaction. When I handed it over, she patted my hand condescendingly. Don't worry, Dad. We'll take care of everything. Wednesday, I met James at his office, along with Robert Chen. The developer was younger than expected, early 30s, with an earnest handshake and honest eyes. Marcus had vetted him thoroughly. Clean record, good reputation, paid fair prices. "Mr. Hayes, I want you to know I'll take good care of your property," Robert said. "I restore houses, not tear them down. Your craftsmanship will be preserved." "That matters to me," I admitted. "I built that house with my own hands." "I can tell. They don't make them like that anymore." We signed papers for an hour. $860,000 cash closing in exactly 1 week. Robert would take possession the day after, giving me time to remove personal items. Sarah and Brad would receive an eviction notice that same morning, standard procedure for new ownership. "You're sure about the timing?" James asked. "Once this is done, there's no going back." "I'm sure. They wanted the house so badly. Let them see what it feels like to lose it." Thursday night brought a family dinner invitation. Sarah insisted I join them, wouldn't take no for an answer. She'd prepared pot roast again this time, remembering to cook it properly. Brad opened a bottle of wine, an actual decent vintage, instead of their usual boxed variety. Emma watched everything with suspicious eyes. "This is nice," Sarah said, raising her glass. "Family together sharing a meal. It's what Mom would have wanted." Invoking Helen at this table in this moment while planning to lock me away. The audacity stole my breath. "To family," Brad toasted. "To family." I echoed, thinking of the very different toast I'd be making in a week. After dinner, Sarah produced more papers. "Just those medical forms we talked about, Dad. Dr. Morrison needs them for your file." I studied them with manufactured confusion. "This looks like more than medical forms." "It's all standard, trust me." Trust. The word sat between us like a dead thing. I signed where she indicated, knowing every signature was being recorded, knowing James had already protected everything that mattered. Let her have her papers. They'd be worthless soon enough. Friday morning, I started packing. Nothing obvious, just sorting through belongings, boxing up Helen's photos and my father's tools. Things that looked like spring cleaning to casual observation, but were actually preparation for departure. Mrs. Patterson stopped by, knocking on my basement door with a covered dish. "Thought you might enjoy some real food," she said loudly, then dropped her voice. "Marcus told me you might need a place to stay soon. My guest room is yours if you want it." "You're a good woman, Edith." "I've watched that girl of yours for years, Jasper. Watched her change from a sweet child to whatever she is now. It breaks my heart, but some people let money poison their souls." "What would you do in my position?" She considered carefully. "Exactly what you're doing. Sometimes love means letting people face consequences. How else do they learn?" I spent the weekend playing my role to perfection. Forgot Emma's name, once calling her Helen. Mixed up breakfast and dinner. Left my wallet in the refrigerator for Brad to find. Each incident carefully orchestrated, every reaction recorded. Sarah documented everything in her journal, which she kept in the kitchen drawer. I photographed pages while she was at work, reading her twisted narrative of my decline. According to her version, I was dangerous, unpredictable, a threat to myself and others. The fiction was so detailed, I wondered if she'd started believing it herself. Sunday night, she made her move. "Dad, we've been thinking. This week, why don't you stay upstairs with us, just temporarily? Your basement apartment needs some repairs." "Repairs? What's wrong with it?" "Just some updates. Plumbing, electrical. Better to be safe." They wanted me, where they could watch me control me. The appointment with Morrison was Tuesday. The competency hearing probably scheduled for shortly after. Moving me upstairs would make it easier to manage my movements, limit my communications. "I suppose," I agreed. "If it's just for a few days." "Of course, just a few days." Monday morning, the day before the house closing, I made my final preparations. Moved my important items to the truck, one box at a time. Called Emma's school, arranging for her to stay late at an after-school program. Set up a room at the Hampton Inn across town. My last dinner in the house I built was Chinese takeout, eaten alone in my basement suite, while listening to Sarah and Brad celebrating upstairs. They'd booked a vacation, apparently. Hawaii, first-class tickets, luxury resort. spending money they didn't have yet, but were certain was coming. I looked around the basement one last time. This space had been my refuge, my prison, my battlefield. Tomorrow it would belong to someone else. Sarah would learn that houses like trust could be lost in an instant. The wolf was ready. The trap was baited. All that remained was the spring. I climbed the stairs slowly, each step measured and careful. Not from age or infirmity, but from the weight of what was coming. At the top, I paused, looking down the hallway of the home I'd created. Tomorrow, everything would change. "Good night, Sarah," I called out. "Night, Dad. See you in the morning for your appointment." No, I thought. You'll see someone very different in the morning. You'll see the man who built this house, ran a company, and raised a daughter who lost her way. You'll see the wolf you thought was sleeping. But tonight, I simply closed the door and let them dream of stolen futures that would never come to pass. Tuesday morning dawned clear, and cold spring surrendering briefly to winter's last gasp. I woke in my hotel room at 4:30, habit from decades of construction work refusing to die. By 5, I was showered, shaved, and dressed in my best suit. Not the shabby costume I'd worn for Morrison, but the charcoal gray I'd worn to close million-dollar deals. James Fitzgerald met me at his office at 6. "Ready for this?" "20 years ready," I replied. Robert Chen arrived with his attorney at 6:30. The closing took less than an hour. Sign here, initial there. Watch $860,000 transfer from his account to mine. By 7:30, I owned nothing but money and memories. The house I'd built with my own hands belonged to someone else. "The eviction notices will be served tomorrow morning at 8, Robert confirmed. "My crew will change the locks at noon. You're sure you don't want to give them warning?" They gave me none when they planned to lock me away. Consider us even. I drove back to the neighborhood, slowly watching familiar streets pass by. The Hendersons were walking their ancient beagle. Mrs. Patterson was watering her roses despite the cold. Normal people living normal lives, unaware of the earthquake about to hit the house on the corner. Sarah's car was in the driveway when I arrived at 7:55. I parked my truck in its usual spot, far end of the drive where it wouldn't block Brad's BMW. Inside, I heard them rushing around, preparing for my 9 o'clock appointment with Morrison. "Dad," Sarah called when I entered. "Perfect timing. I've laid out your clothes." The same shabby outfit from before. She'd actually prepared a costume for my institutionalization. "Actually," I said, "I'm already dressed." She stopped mid-step, taking in my suit, my straight posture, the clarity in my eyes. For a moment, confusion flickered across her face. Then she forced a smile. "Oh, you're feeling better today. That's wonderful. But maybe something more comfortable for the doctor?" "I'm not going to the doctor, Sarah." "Dad, we talked about this. The appointment is a scam. Morrison's a hack who sells diagnoses. You're paying him to declare me incompetent so you can steal my assets." The words hung in the air like a judge's gavel. Brad appeared from the kitchen coffee mug, frozen halfway to his lips. Sarah's mouth opened and closed soundlessly. "I don't know what you're talking about," she managed finally. Tuesday, March 15th. I recited from memory. "You told Brad and I, quote, once we have power of attorney, we can sell the house. 800,000 will solve everything." Thursday, March 17th. Dr. Morrison says he can have Dad declared incompetent within a month. Should I continue? "You were listening." Outrage replaced her shock. "You were spying on us." "In my own home, yes. Every word recorded, every scheme documented. Your journal makes for interesting reading, too. Very creative fiction about my supposed decline." Brad set down his mug carefully. "Jasper, you're confused. We only want what's best. What's best for your gambling debts? 80,000 to the Riverside Casino, another 20 to private games. I have photos, Brad, receipts, evidence of every dollar I gave you for job interviews that went straight to the poker tables." His face went white. Sarah turned on him. 80,000. You said it was under control." "Focus," I interrupted. You have bigger problems than marital discord. Pack your things. You have 24 hours. Sarah laughed high and brittle. Pack, this is my house, Dad. Mom left it to me. No, she didn't. Helen died without a will. As surviving spouse, I inherited everything. Check the courthouse records if you don't believe me. But you said... I never said anything. You assumed. And I let you to see who you really were when you thought I had nothing to offer but rent money. The truth crashed over them in visible waves. Brad sank into a chair. Sarah gripped the wall for support. You can't just throw us out, she said desperately. We have rights. Tenant rights. You do. Which is why you have 24 hours before the sheriff arrives. I suggest you use them wisely. Dad, please, let's talk about this. We're family. Family doesn't plot to lock away fathers. Family doesn't steal and lie and scheme. You stopped being family the moment you decided I was worth more as a prisoner than a parent. Emma's voice came from the stairs. Is it true? Everything Grandpa said? We all turned. She stood in her school uniform backpack over one shoulder, face etched with disappointment that no 14-year-old should wear. Emma, honey, go back upstairs, Sarah started. Is it true? Emma repeated, looking at her mother. Were you really going to put Grandpa in a home? Sarah's silence was answer enough. Emma's eyes filled with tears. I'm going to school, she announced. Grandpa, can you drive me? Of course, sweetheart. Emma, don't you dare, Sarah began. What don't dare? What, Mom, tell the truth? Act like family love, my grandfather. Emma's voice broke. I'm ashamed of you. Both of you. She fled to my truck. I followed, leaving Sarah and Brad in the wreckage of their schemes. The drive to school was quiet until Emma spoke. Where will you live now? I have a place. Don't worry about me. What about us? Where will we go? The question I'd wrestled with for weeks. Punishing Sarah and Brad was justice. But Emma was collateral damage, innocent of everything but poor choice in parents. Your parents will figure something out. And Emma, whatever happens, you can always call me. Always. They're going to blame me, she said quietly. Say I took your side. You took the right side. That's different. I dropped her at school with a promise to check in later. Then I drove to the hotel, changed into work clothes, and returned to start moving my belongings. Sarah and Brad were gone, probably consulting lawyers who would tell them they had no case. I worked methodically, loading boxes while memories flooded back. Teaching Sarah to ride her bike in this driveway. Building the treehouse that still stood in the backyard. Helen planting roses along the fence, complaining good-naturedly about the Texas heat. 40 years of life soaked into every board and brick. Mrs. Patterson appeared with coffee and assistance. Heard there was some excitement this morning. Word travels fast. Sarah left like her hair was on fire. Brad followed 20 minutes later with a suitcase. Going to be quite the story at the next homeowners meeting. We worked in companionable silence, two old soldiers who'd seen enough battles to know when the war was won. By noon, my truck was loaded with everything that mattered. What now? Mrs. Patterson asked. Now I wait for the real fireworks. Sarah's about to discover exactly how much her schemes have cost her. Right on schedule, my phone exploded with calls and texts. Sarah begging. Brad threatening. Numbers I didn't recognize, probably their lawyer. I let them all go to voicemail, documenting every threat, every plea, every admission of guilt. At 2 o'clock, I met with a reporter from the senior advocacy blog Marcus had contacted. Patricia Williams was 60 herself, with steel gray hair and sharper eyes. Elder financial abuse is epidemic, she said, reviewing my documentation. But rarely so well documented. You're willing to go public? If it helps one family avoid this, yes. It'll help more than one. This Morrison character alone has probably victimized dozens. Your evidence could shut him down. We talked for 2 hours. She took copies of everything, promised a series of articles that would shine light on the dark corner where family greed met elder vulnerability. Sarah wanted attention she'd get more than she bargained for. That evening, I sat in my hotel room, watching the sun set over the city I'd helped build. My phone showed 53 missed calls, 28 texts, and 12 voicemails. None from Emma, which worried me more than all of Sarah's hysteria combined. At 8, a knock interrupted my brooding. I opened the door to find my granddaughter still in school uniform, eyes red from crying. "Mom kicked me out," she said simply. "Said I chose you over family. Can I stay here tonight?" I pulled her into a hug, feeling her shake with suppressed sobs. "You can stay as long as you need." "She's so angry, Grandpa. Says you've ruined everything. Dad left, went to his brother's house. The neighbors are all talking. Mom just sits there drinking wine and crying." "I'm sorry you're caught in this, sweetheart." "Don't be sorry. You did the right thing. They were going to hurt you. For money." She pulled back, wiping her eyes. "Is that really all I'm worth to them, money?" "No, Emma. Your mother's lost right now, confused. Greed does that to people, but underneath, she loves you." "Does she? Because it doesn't feel like it. We ordered pizza, watched old movies, didn't talk about the hurricane tearing through our family." Emma fell asleep on the hotel couch, looking younger than her 14 years. I covered her with a blanket, then stepped outside to make a call. James answered on the second ring. "How bad is it?" "Sarah's imploding. Emma's here with me. Brad's gone." "Emma's a minor. Sarah could cause problems." "Let her try. I have evidence of neglect, emotional abuse exposing Emma to Brad's gambling. Any custody fight will end badly for her." "What's your next move?" I looked through the window at my sleeping granddaughter. "Take care of Emma. Let Sarah face her choices. Maybe losing everything will teach her what really matters. And if it doesn't, then at least Emma will know someone in this family puts love before money." The night stretched long and dark. Somewhere across town, Sarah sat in a house she'd thought was hers, surrounded by boxes and broken dreams. Brad huddled at his brother's, probably calculating odds at poker tables. Emma slept fitfully, twitching with bad dreams. And I sat, watch an old wolf guarding what remained of his pack. The hurricane had hit devastation in its wake. Tomorrow would bring eviction notices, locked doors, and public humiliation. But tonight, I focused on the only thing that mattered, the granddaughter who'd chosen love over greed, truth over comfortable lies. The storm would pass. It always did. What remained afterward would show who we really were when everything else was stripped away. Wednesday morning arrived with sheriff's deputies' eviction notices and a small crowd of neighbors who'd gathered to watch the drama unfold. I observed from my truck parked across the street, Emma beside me eating a McDonald's breakfast sandwich. "Should we be here?" she asked nervously. "You don't have to watch," I said. "I can take you to school." "No. I need to see this. Need to see her face when she realizes what she threw away." Sarah emerged at 8:15 still in yesterday's clothes, hair unbrushed, makeup smeared. She looked like she'd aged 10 years overnight. When she saw the deputies, she tried reasoning, then pleading, then screaming. None of it mattered. The law was clear. She had 1 hour to gather essentials. Then, the locks would be changed. Brad arrived in an Uber at 8:30, probably because his BMW had been repossessed. He took one look at the scene and started walking away. Sarah caught him at the sidewalk. "Where are you going?" she shrieked. "We need to deal with this." There's no we anymore, Sarah. This was your scheme, your father, your house to lose." He shrugged off her grasping hands. "I'm done. My lawyer will send divorce papers." "You can't just leave. What about 18 years of marriage? What about it you spent the last 2 covering my gambling debts? We're even." He climbed into another Uber and disappeared, leaving Sarah standing on the sidewalk like an abandoned mannequin. The neighbors whispered among themselves, smartphones discreetly recording. By noon, the whole neighborhood would know every detail. Robert Chen arrived at 9 with his crew and a locksmith. He approached my truck, expression sympathetic. "Mr. Hayes, I'm sorry about the family drama. If you need more time, no. Proceed as planned. The lesson loses impact if there are no consequences. Sarah spotted me then. She ran over, pounding on my window until I lowered it. How could you? She screamed. Your own daughter. You've destroyed my life. No, Sarah. You destroyed your life. I just stopped you from destroying mine. I'll sue elder abuse fraud something. With what money? And which lawyer will take your case once they see the evidence of your forgery conspiracy? With Morrison plans to institutionalize me. You're lucky I haven't pressed criminal charges. The fight went out of her like air from a punctured balloon. Dad, please. I have nowhere to go. Sell your jewelry. Brad pawned most of it, but there might be something left. Check women's shelters. Apply for jobs. Do what millions of people do every day, survive on their own efforts instead of stealing from others. What about Emma? Emma's safe. When you're ready to be a mother instead of a schemer, we'll discuss visitation. You can't keep her from me. I'm not keeping her anywhere. She chose to leave. Ask yourself why a 14-year-old would rather sleep in a hotel than her own home. The deputies began carrying boxes to the curb. Sarah's belongings accumulated over years of living in my house reduced to a pile on the sidewalk. She stood watching tears streaming down her face. But were they tears of remorse or just self-pity? I couldn't tell anymore. Mrs. Patterson approached with a business card. Sarah, this is my niece. She runs a women's shelter downtown. They have programs job training. It's a start. Sarah took the card numbly. For a moment, her eyes met mine through the windshield. I saw the daughter I'd raised flickering beneath the stranger she'd become. Then, the moment passed, and she turned away. By 10 o'clock, it was over. New locks installed Sarah's possessions, either loaded in a rental truck or sitting by the curb. She sat on the porch steps of what used to be her home, holding an eviction notice like a dead thing. Should I talk to her? Emma asked quietly. That's your choice, sweetheart. Emma opened the truck door, walked slowly to her mother. They talked for 5 minutes, Sarah gesturing wildly, Emma standing firm. Finally, Emma hugged her mother and walked back, sliding into the truck with red eyes. She says I'm choosing money over family, Emma reported. Says you've poisoned me against her. What do you think? I think she's so lost in her own lies she can't see truth anymore. Emma wiped her eyes. I told her I loved her, but couldn't live with her. Not until she gets help. That was very mature. I don't feel mature. I feel like my family just exploded. It did, but sometimes things need to break before they can heal properly. We drove away as the moving truck pulled up. In the rearview mirror, I saw Sarah standing alone on the sidewalk watching us leave. She looked small, defeated, nothing like the woman who'd screamed at me about rent just 1 week ago. That afternoon, I met with Patricia Williams for our follow-up interview. The first article had already gone viral, shared thousands of times on social media. Elder advocacy groups were calling for investigations into Dr. Morrison. 3 other families had come forward with similar stories. Your daughter's become quite infamous, Patricia noted. The security footage you provided is damning. Will it help others? Already has. Morrison's practice is under investigation. The state's reviewing competency evaluation procedures. You've started something important here. Emma spent the afternoon at the hotel doing homework, while I handled legal matters. James had prepared custody documents, financial arrangements, everything needed to provide stability for my granddaughter. Sarah hadn't contested anything, probably because she knew she'd lose. That evening, we looked at apartments near Emma's school. She chose a modest 2-bedroom, nothing fancy, but clean and safe. The complex had a pool, study room, even a small gym. Normal teenage amenities for a girl whose life had been anything but normal lately. Can we afford this? Emma asked, worried. Sweetheart, I could buy the entire complex if I wanted. But that's not the point. We'll live simply, honestly. Money's a tool, not a goal. Is that why you hid it? The money from selling your company? Partially. But mostly I wanted to see if your mother loved me, or just what I could provide. And now we know. Thursday brought more fallout. Brad's brother called fishing for information about my finances. Sarah's friends reached out some supportive others, clearly angling for gossip. The story had reached local news, though names were withheld. Area woman attempts to institutionalize father for inheritance, made for compelling television. Emma handled it better than expected. Her real friends stood by her. Others revealed themselves as fair-weather companions, more interested in drama than friendship. She learned hard lessons about human nature that week. Friday afternoon, Sarah called from an unknown number. Her voice sounded different, smaller, broken. "Dad, I'm at the shelter Mrs. Patterson recommended. They've been kind." "Good. Kindness helps." "I've been thinking. About Mom. What she would say." "What do you think she'd say?" A long pause. "That I lost my way. That greed poisoned me. That I betrayed everything she taught me about family." Helen was wise. "Dad, I'm sorry. Not sorry I got caught. Sorry I became someone who needed catching. Does that make sense?" "It's a start. The shelter has counseling, job placement. I start Monday at a dental clinic assistant work. It's not much, but it's honest." "Honest is everything, Sarah. Could I see Emma supervised, whatever you think best? I just need her to know I'm trying." I considered carefully. "Call her tomorrow. If she agrees, Sunday lunch. Public place. 1 hour." "Thank you." Her voice cracked. "I know I don't deserve chances, but thank you." Saturday. Patricia's final article ran with the headline, "The House That Greed Built a Family's Cautionary Tale." It detailed everything: the scheme, the evidence, the public humiliation. But it ended with hope, mentioning Sarah's entry into counseling, the changes in elder law being proposed. The daughter who chose integrity over inheritance. Emma read it slowly, then looked at me. "Do you think Mom will really change?" "I don't know. People can surprise you both ways. But she's trying, and that matters." "What about us? What happens now?" "Now we build something new, honest, based on love, not money. The way family should be." Sunday's lunch was awkward, but civil. Sarah looked healthier, clear-eyed. She apologized to Emma without excuses, acknowledged her failures, outlined her plans for recovery. Small steps, but in the right direction. As we left the restaurant, Sarah caught my arm. "The house. Do you miss it?" "Every day. But houses can be rebuilt. Trust is harder." Maybe someday I can earn that back." "Maybe. Time will tell." We drove away, leaving Sarah standing on the sidewalk again. But this time, she wasn't alone. The shelter counselor waited nearby, ready to drive her back to her new life. It wasn't much, but it was honest. That evening, Emma and I stood on the balcony of our new apartment, watching the sunset. The view wasn't spectacular, just city rooftops and distant hills. But it was ours, earned, honestly shared freely. "Grandpa," Emma said quietly, "was it worth it, losing the house, breaking up the family?" I thought about the question about Helen, about the daughter I'd raised, and the stranger she'd become. About houses built with love and destroyed by greed. About hard lessons and harder choices. "Ask me in a year," I said finally. "When we see who we've all become." Emma nodded, wise beyond her years. Below us, the city hummed with life. Somewhere out there, Sarah was learning to stand on her own feet. Brad was probably at a poker table chasing the next bad beat. Dr. Morrison was facing investigation, his victims finding justice. And here we stood, grandfather and granddaughter, building something new from the wreckage of what was. It wasn't the ending anyone had planned, but maybe it was the one we needed. Time would tell if the lessons stuck, if redemption was possible, if family could survive its own worst impulses. The wolf had won his battle, protected what mattered most. Now came the harder task, teaching the pack to hunt with honor instead of hunger. One day at a time, one choice at a time, one chance at a time. The house was gone, but home was wherever love lived honestly. and that no one could evict us from. 6 months later, I stood in front of a classroom at the Senior Community Center, teaching basic carpentry to 20 eager students. My hands steady as ever, guided a 70-year-old widow named Margaret through her first proper dovetail joint. "See?" I encouraged her. "Feel how they slide together. That's 50 years of holding power in that joint." "Just like a good marriage," Margaret laughed. "Tight fit, no gaps, built to last." The class chuckled. I'd started teaching these workshops 3 months ago, partly to fill time, mostly because working with wood reminded me who I was beneath all the family drama. The satisfaction of creating something solid and true never got old. Emma waited in the back row, doing homework, but really keeping me company. She'd grown 2 inches and gained a quiet confidence that made her look older than her 15 years. Living through betrayal and choosing integrity had matured her in ways I wished hadn't been necessary. After class, we drove to our weekly commitment volunteering at the homeless shelter, where Sarah now lived and worked. She'd transitioned from resident to staff member 2 months ago, earning minimum wage, but rebuilding her life with determined steps. "Table 7 needs another server," Sarah called out as we entered, then smiled. "Hey, Dad, Emma, thanks for coming." She looked different. Healthy. The designer clothes had given way to practical jeans and shelter t-shirts. Her hair, once salon perfect, was pulled back in a simple ponytail. But her eyes held something they'd lacked before genuine peace. "Wouldn't miss it," I said, tying on an apron. For 2 hours, we served meals side by side. Sarah had insisted on this arrangement when we'd started rebuilding our relationship. "I need you to see who I'm becoming, not just hear about it," she'd said. So every Saturday we worked together, serving those who'd lost their way just as she had. "Jasper." A familiar voice called out. I turned to see Dr. Morrison in the food line, looking haggard and years older. His medical license had been revoked, his assets frozen pending multiple lawsuits. The investigating journalist Patricia had connected me with other families he'd wronged, and together we'd built an airtight case. "Doctor." I nodded, filling his plate without comment. His hands shook as he accepted the food. I wanted to apologize. What I did, what I was planning to do? "Eat your meal," I said simply. "Apologize by becoming better." He shuffled away, and Sarah watched him go. "You were kinder than I would have been." Kindness cost nothing. Revenge already had its day. After our shift, the 3 of us sat in the shelter's small break room. Emma showed Sarah her report card with straight A's, and Sarah cried with pride. These moments, small but real, were slowly stitching our family back together. "I have news," Sarah said eventually. 2 pieces, actually. First, the divorce is final. Brad agreed to walk away with nothing if I didn't pursue his gambling debts. "That's probably best," I said. "And second," she pulled out an envelope. "I've been saving. Every penny after basic expenses. It's not much, but I want to start paying you back. For the rent money, I took the lies everything." I looked at the check. $200, probably representing months of sacrifice on her part. "Keep it," I said, pushing it back. "Or better yet, start a college fund for Emma." "Dad, I need to do this. Need to make amends." "You are making amends. Every day you show up here. Every person you help. Every honest word you speak. That's worth more than money." Emma reached over and squeezed her mother's hand. "He's right, Mom. We don't need your money. We need you." Sarah broke down, then months of hard-won composure cracking. I pulled both my girls close, feeling the walls between us finally crumbling completely. In that small break room, surrounded by the smell of industrial coffee and the sounds of redemption, our family began truly healing. Later that month, the documentary premiered. The Silent Wolf, a story of elder betrayal and family redemption, had started as evidence for potential criminal charges, but evolved into something larger. The filmmaker had followed our story for months, capturing not just the betrayal, but the aftermath. We watched it together at the community center, joined by Mrs. Patterson, Marcus James, and 50 others who'd supported us through the journey. Seeing our pain on screen was difficult, but the message resonated. Elder abuse often comes from those we trust most, but justice and healing remain possible. Sarah spoke during the Q&A afterward, her voice steady despite trembling hands. "I was the villain in this story," she began. "I let greed and desperation turn me into someone who would hurt my own father for money. But I want people to know that villains can choose to change. It's harder than anything I've ever done, but it's possible." Someone in the audience asked how she'd found the strength to change. "I lost everything I thought I wanted and found everything I actually needed," Sarah replied. "Rock bottom became my foundation, and my father's tough love that wasn't cruelty. That was the most loving thing he could have done." The local news picked up the story, but differently this time. Instead of sensationalizing the scandal, they focused on the redemption. 3 families reconciled after seeing our journey. Dr. Morrison's victims found closure through the legal system. New state laws protecting elderly parents from financial exploitation passed with unanimous support. Emma thrived in our stable environment. She joined the debate team, made honor roll consistently, and even started teaching kids woodworking classes at the community center. The girl who'd once snuck cookies in my basement had become a young woman of remarkable character. "I want to be a lawyer," she announced one evening over dinner. "But not like the ones who helped Mom scheme. I want to protect families, keep them together when possible, safeguard them when necessary." "You'll be brilliant at it," Sarah said, visiting for our now regular Tuesday dinners. "Just promise you'll never let money corrupt you." "Money didn't corrupt you, Mom. Fear did. Fear of not having enough, of Brad leaving, of admitting failure. Money was just the symptom." Wisdom from the mouths of teenagers. Sarah and I exchanged glances, both recognizing Helen's spirit in Emma's words. My late wife would have been proud of her granddaughter, maybe even proud of how her daughter had fought back from darkness. Robert Chen invited me to see the house renovations one last time before the new owners moved in. I'd resisted for months, but finally agreed. Emma and Sarah came with me, all of us needing closure with the place that had been home. "I kept the bones exactly as you built them," Robert said, leading us through. "Just updated the surfaces. The foundation you laid will last another 100 years." The metaphor wasn't lost on any of us. We walked through rooms full of memories, both bitter and sweet. Sarah touched the door frame where we'd marked her height as a child. Emma found the squeaky floorboard she'd always avoided when sneaking snacks. I ran my hand along beams I'd set in place when Nixon was president. "It's beautiful," Sarah said softly. "You built something amazing here, Dad." We all did. Then, we almost destroyed it with our choices. But look, I gestured around us. The house survived, changed, sold, renovated, but still standing. Just like us. A young family would move in next week. 2 kids, a dog, dreams of their own to build within these walls. The cycle continued, and that felt right. 1 year after that kitchen table confrontation, I sat writing checks from the trust I'd established. $50,000 to the senior center for expanded programming. $75,000 to the shelter for a new wing. Smaller amounts to families recovering from elder abuse. The money from selling the house had multiplied through careful investment, and now it served a purpose greater than any of us. "You could have kept it all," Emma observed, helping me stuff envelopes. "Lived like a king." I am living like a king. I have my family back, honest work, teaching others, and enough resources to help people. What else could royalty offer? Sarah arrived with dinner she'd cooked in her small apartment. Simple spaghetti with meat sauce, but made with love instead of obligation. We ate together 3 generations around a modest table, sharing genuine laughter. "I've been thinking about Brad," Sarah mentioned carefully. "He reached out. He's in Gamblers Anonymous, 90 days clean. Wanted to apologize." "What did you tell him?" "That he needs to apologize to himself first. Then, to everyone he borrowed from. I gave him your office address at the senior center, if that's okay. You deserve to hear from him directly." If he's serious about recovery, I'll listen. You know what strikes me most about this whole journey, Sarah reflected. We all thought we were fighting over money and houses, but really, we were fighting over love. Who deserved it? Who'd lost it? Whether it could be rebuilt after betrayal. And what's the verdict? I asked. Love's tougher than any house you ever built, Dad. It can take a beating and still stand. Emma raised her glass of apple juice. To houses that become homes again, even when they're just apartments. To families that break but don't stay broken. To second chances and tough love, and grandpas who know when to be wolves. We clinked glasses, three survivors of our own making. Outside the city hummed with life and possibility. Somewhere out there, other families faced their own trials by greed. But maybe our story would reach them, remind them that money meant nothing compared to trust, that houses were just wood and nails compared to honest hearts. That sometimes the greatest gift we could give each other was the chance to fail, fall, and rise stronger. Hey, Sarah said suddenly. Remember that pot roast I used to make? The terrible one. Like chewing rubber bands. I confirmed. I've been practicing. Want to risk Sunday dinner? I promise it's better now. Everything's better now, Emma said wisely. And she was right. Not perfect, not without scars, but better. We'd learned the hard way that family wasn't about blood, or houses or inheritance. It was about choosing each other over easy money, truth over comfortable lies, redemption over revenge. The wolf had protected his pack by letting them face consequences, and in losing everything, we'd found what actually mattered. The house on Maple Street sheltered a new family now, but home was wherever we gathered with honest hearts and grateful spirits. Sarah had screamed at me to pay rent or get out. I'd paid a different price and gotten something priceless in return. A daughter who'd found her way back, a granddaughter wise beyond her years, and the knowledge that love could survive even our worst selves. Dear friends, if you've stayed with me through this journey, you know that family relationships are often our greatest tests. Sometimes, love means letting go. Sometimes, it means holding firm boundaries. And sometimes, just sometimes, it means being patient enough to watch prodigal children find their way home. Have you faced similar challenges with family members who let money corrupt their values? How did you handle the balance between justice and mercy? I'd love to hear your stories in the comments below. If this story resonated with you, please consider subscribing to hear more tales of resilience and redemption. Share this with someone who might need to hear that it's never too late to change course, that rock bottom can become a foundation, that the toughest love often builds the strongest families. And remember, like that house on Maple Street, we're all more resilient than we think. We can weather betrayal, survive our own poor choices, and rebuild on stronger foundations. Sometimes, we just need someone to believe in our ability to change, even when they're changing the locks. Until next time, hold your loved ones close, but hold your values closer. Build your life on truth rather than greed, and remember that the best inheritance you can leave or receive isn't money, it's the wisdom to know what really matters. Thank you for joining me on this journey. May your own path be filled with more trust than tests, more love than loss, and may you always have the courage to be the wolf when needed, and the wisdom to know when to let the sheep find their own way home. With gratitude and hope for your own family's story, Jasper.